Family kicked me out on my birthday. Now they're trying to claim my new home as a family asset. Hey, I'm Robin. And man, do I have a story for you? I'm 27, and life's been a bit of a mess lately. I work as a marketing assistant, which is not glamorous, but it pays the bills. Well, some of them. I live with my parents and my younger brother Tom in a not so great house. The place is cramped, falling apart, and always smells weird, but it's home, or at least it was. Let me start by saying I've been contributing a lot around here. I've been paying a big chunk of the bills, buying groceries, and even handling house repairs when something breaks down. You'd think I'd get a little appreciation for that, right? But nah. Every time I walk into the room, I hear my mom, Susan, talking down to me like I'm some failure. Robin, when are you going to get a real job? She'd say. It's like her favorite line. I mean, what does she even mean by real job? I bust my butt at work. Marketing isn't easy, but in her eyes, because I'm not a doctor or a lawyer, it doesn't count. Every time I try to defend myself, it's the same response. If it was a real job, you'd have your own place by now. Yeah, okay, Mom. And then there's Tom, my 26-year-old brother. We've never really gotten along. He's got this smug attitude, always looking down on me like he's better than I am because he has more followers on social media or whatever. He barely lifts a finger around the house. Guess who picks up the slack? Yep, me. But does anyone care? Nope. Anyway, my 28th birthday was coming up, and I was kind of excited for it despite everything. I know, dumb, right? But I really thought maybe this year would be different. I even saved up and got myself a nice cake from this fancy bakery downtown. I was imagining how we'd have a little celebration. Just the four of us. It wasn't going to be anything big, but I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd actually care. So a few days before, I sat down with my mom and dad, Mark, to talk about it. Hey, I was thinking we could do something for my birthday this weekend. Just, hang out, maybe have some cake, I said, trying to keep my hopes in check. Mom didn't even look up from her magazine. We'll see, Robin. We might have plans. Plans? On my birthday? I should have known something was up, but I didn't want to believe it. I mean, I've been living here my whole life, helping out, working hard. Why would they have plans that didn't include me? Fast forward to my birthday, and I was feeling good. I went to work, got a bunch of happy birthday messages from coworkers, and even treated myself to a new outfit. Things were looking up, right? I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd get home and they'd have a little surprise waiting for me. I don't know, a card, a cake, something, anything. But the second I pulled into the driveway, my stomach dropped. My stuff was out on the front lawn. Boxes, bags, my clothes, my books, everything, just thrown out there like trash. I jumped out of the car, my heart pounding, and rushed over to the porch. And there they were, my mom, dad, and Tom, just standing there staring at me. It was like some twisted family meeting or something. My heart was racing, and I couldn't even think straight. What's going on? I asked, trying to keep my voice from shaking. Mom stepped forward, her face cold like she didn't care at all. Robin, it's time for you to move out. You're not welcome here anymore. I stood there, frozen, like I couldn't process what she was saying. Move out? On my birthday? What kind of sick joke was this? I looked at Dad, hoping he'd step in, say something, tell me this was all a misunderstanding. But no. He just stared at the ground, his hands stuffed in his pockets like he couldn't even look at me. I felt this rush of anger and confusion. But it's my birthday! Where am I supposed to go? My voice cracked, and I hated how desperate I sounded. That's when Tom chimed in, his smirk making me want to scream. Maybe you should have thought about that before being such a burden all these years. A burden? I was the one paying the bills, buying food, keeping this crappy house from falling apart. How was I the burden? I looked at my mom, hoping, begging for some kind of explanation, something that made sense. It wasn't enough, she said, her voice sharp like a slap. We need the space, and frankly, you need to grow up. That was it. No empathy, no second chances, just cold indifference. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I refused to let them see me break down. Can I at least get my things? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. They're all packed, my mom replied, gesturing to the boxes on the lawn like it was no big deal. You should go now. That was it. Happy birthday to me, right? I started loading the boxes into my car, my hands shaking. It felt surreal, like I was living someone else's nightmare. I wanted to scream, to cry, to ask them how they could be so heartless, but I didn't. I just kept moving one box after another, trying to hold myself together. As I finished packing up the last of my things, I turned to look at them one last time, hoping, no, praying that they'd change their minds, that they'd realize how messed up this was. Why today? Why on my birthday? I asked, barely able to get the words out. Mom didn't even blink. Consider it our gift to you. Independence. And just like that, I was gone. On what should have been a day of celebration, I found myself driving away from the only home I'd ever known, with no idea where I was headed. I ended up at some cheap motel, the kind with a flickering neon sign out front, spending my birthday alone, surrounded by my hastily packed belongings. I sat there, staring at the ceiling, wondering how the people who were supposed to love me could be so cruel. How could they do this to me, their own daughter, on my birthday? That night, I made a promise to myself. I would never rely on them again. I would pick myself up, no matter how hard it got, because clearly I was on my own now. After that whole birthday fiasco, I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. It wasn't just about getting kicked out, though, yeah, that sucked. It was realizing that the people I thought were supposed to have my back just didn't care. I spent that night in a dingy motel, trying to wrap my head around it all, but there was no making sense of it. So the next day, I did the only thing I could think of. I threw myself into work. I mean, what else was I going to do? I couldn't just sit around feeling sorry for myself. I had bills to pay, and now I needed to find a place to live. My boss, Hannah, noticed pretty quickly that something was off. I was at the office at all hours, hunched over my laptop, answering emails like a robot. She's sharp, and it didn't take long for her to pull me aside. It was late, and the office was practically empty when she found me at my desk. "Robin, can we talk?" she asked, leaning on the edge of my cubicle. I looked up, and I must have looked like a mess because she gave me this concerned look. "You're going to work yourself into the ground at this rate. What's going on?" I didn't want to get into it, but the second she asked, it all just came out. I told her everything, how my family kicked me out, how I was staying in this horrible motel with my stuff still in boxes. As I talked, Hannah's expression softened. She didn't say anything at first, just listened, which was more than my family ever did. When I finished, she let out a sigh and said, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I shrugged, feeling embarrassed. I mean, she's my boss, not my therapist, but she didn't seem to mind. "Look, Robin, I have a spare room in my place. It's not much, but you're welcome to stay there until you figure things out." I couldn't believe it. I didn't even know how to respond at first. "Are you serious?" I asked, half expecting her to change her mind or something, but she smiled and nodded. "Of course, I know what it's like to be in a tough spot. Don't worry about it." I was so relieved I almost started crying again, but I managed to hold it together. "Thank you," I whispered. "I don't know how to repay you." She waved me off. "Don't even mention it. You've been killing it at work, and I'd hate to see you burn out. Just promise me you'll take care of yourself." And just like that, I had a place to stay. It wasn't home, but it was something. I packed up my stuff from the motel and moved into Hannah's guest room the next day. It was a little small, but it was clean, warm, and quiet, which was all I needed at that point. The first night there, I sat on the bed just trying to process everything. I felt a little better, but there was still this hole in my chest, like everything I thought I knew had been ripped away. But I didn't let myself wallow for too long. I threw myself into work even harder, if that's possible. Hannah wasn't kidding when she said she'd push me harder, but honestly, I appreciated it. It kept me distracted. I took on more freelance gigs, too. I figured the more money I could save, the faster I could get out on my own. It wasn't easy, though. There were nights where I stayed up until 3 a.m., just staring at my computer, trying to crank out designs while my mind kept drifting back to my family. I kept thinking, maybe they'd call, maybe they'd apologize, maybe they'd realize they messed up. But no, nothing. Radio silence. During all this, my best friend Mike was a godsend. We'd been friends since college, and even though we weren't living in the same city anymore, we'd always stayed close. I told him what happened, and he was furious. "I can't believe they do that to you," he said during one of our calls. "You deserve better." He wasn't wrong, but it still stung. "Yeah, well, it is what it is," I muttered. "I just gotta keep moving forward." Mike, being the joker he is, tried to lighten the mood. "You know what would really piss them off?" he said with a laugh. "You becoming wildly successful and rubbing it in their faces." I laughed, but the idea stuck with me. Not that I wanted revenge or anything. Okay, maybe a little, but mostly I just wanted to prove to myself that I didn't need them. I could make it on my own. So that became my mission. Work harder, save more, and eventually get out of Hannah's guest room and into a place of my own. Over the next few months, things started looking up. My designs were getting noticed by bigger clients, and I was bringing in more money than I ever had. I kept telling myself that every late night, every all-nighter was worth it. And honestly, it was. Slowly but surely, I was rebuilding my life, one project at a time. I started to feel like maybe I didn't need my family after all. Sure, it hurt, and it probably always would, but I was proving to myself that I could survive without them. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. And that felt good. One day, Hannah pulled me into her office with this huge grin on her face. Robin, I've got some good news, she said. How does a lead designer sound to you? With a raise, of course. I was speechless. Are you serious? I blurted out, feeling like I might pass out from excitement. Dead serious, she said, still grinning. You've earned it. You've been doing incredible work, and it's time to recognize that. I couldn't believe it. Lead designer? Me? I felt like all the hard work, all the sleepless nights, all the stress, it was finally paying off. Thank you, I managed to say, still in shock. Don't thank me yet, she said, winking. You're going to have a lot more responsibility now. I didn't care. I was ready for it. This was what I'd been working for. With the raise and all the freelance gigs I'd been stacking up, I was finally in a place where I could start thinking about my next move. Literally. I wasn't going to stay in Hannah's guest room forever, and now I could actually start looking for a place of my own. But the thing was, it wasn't just about the money or the job. It was about finally feeling like I was in control of my life again. For so long, I'd felt stuck. Stuck in that house with my family, stuck in their expectations of me, stuck in their judgment. But now I was free. I was making my own decisions, building my own life, and no one could take that away from me. I was finally moving forward, and it felt damn good. A few weeks after I got promoted to lead designer, I was finally starting to feel like I had my life together. I'd been working nonstop, saving money, and I was even thinking about getting my own place soon. Things were really looking up for me. But of course, right when you think everything is going smoothly, life decides to throw a wrench in the gears. It started one random Wednesday afternoon. I was in the middle of working on this big project when my phone buzzed. I didn't think much of it, just figured it was an email or something. But when I glanced at the screen, I saw the name I least expected. Tom. My brother. The last person I wanted to hear from. For a second, I just stared at the phone. Part of me didn't want to answer it. I hadn't heard from Tom or my parents since they kicked me out on my birthday, and honestly, I didn't miss them. But curiosity got the better of me, and I picked up. Hey, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. Robin, it's me, Tom replied, his voice quieter than usual. It wasn't his usual cocky tone, which threw me off. I know it's you, I said, a little annoyed. What do you want? There was this long pause on the other end, and for a moment I thought he'd hung up. But then he spoke again, and I could hear the hesitation in his voice. I need help. I raised an eyebrow, not believing what I was hearing. Tom? Needing help from me? The same brother who stood there and watched while my stuff was thrown out onto the front lawn? Yeah, right. I don't know what to tell you, I replied, already feeling the anger bubbling up inside me. You made it pretty clear I'm not part of the family anymore. He let out a sigh. Look, I know things have been rough, but this isn't about that. It's about Dad. He lost his job, and Mom's spending is out of control. I can't afford school anymore. There it was, the real reason for the call. It wasn't about me or making amends or even caring about what happened. It was about money. It was always about money. I bit my lip, fighting back the wave of emotions that hit me. Part of me wanted to tell him off, to remind him how they treated me, to hang up and never look back. But another part of me, a small stupid part, still felt that pull of obligation. They were my family after all. Or at least, they used to be. So let me get this straight, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. You're calling me now, after months of silence, because you need money? It's not just about the money, Tom said quickly. We're in a bad spot, Robin. You know how Mom is? She's been spending like crazy, and Dad? Well, he's not exactly doing great without a job. I don't know what to do. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. That sounds like a you problem, Tom, not mine. Come on, Robin. We're family, he said, and I could practically hear the desperation in his voice. It was the first time in years he'd sounded vulnerable, but I wasn't falling for it. Family? I scoffed, unable to stop the bitterness from seeping into my tone. You guys threw me out on my birthday. Family doesn't do that. He didn't have an answer for that, just a long pause. And honestly, that silence told me everything I needed to know. I'm done being your backup plan, I said, my voice firm. You and Mom and Dad made it pretty clear where I stand with you all. Don't call me again. Before he could respond, I hung up. My hand was shaking slightly as I set the phone down on my desk. I felt this strange mix of anger, sadness, and relief. It felt good to stand up for myself, to finally put my foot down and say no. But at the same time, it sucked that it had come to this. I sat there for a few minutes, just staring at the wall, trying to process everything. I kept thinking about all the times I'd bent over backward for my family, all the times I'd sacrificed my own happiness for theirs. And where had it gotten me? Homeless on my birthday. It was time to stop feeling guilty for walking away. They made their choice, and I had made mine. After that call, I threw myself back into work. I didn't want to dwell on it too long because I knew it would just drag me down. So I focused on the project I was working on, trying to push the thoughts of Tom and my parents to the back of my mind. But the thing is, once those thoughts creep in, they're hard to get rid of. That night, as I lay in bed, I kept replaying the conversation over and over in my head. I kept thinking about what I could have said, what I should have said. I wanted to believe that maybe, deep down, they were sorry. But I knew better. They weren't calling because they missed me or because they regretted what they did. They were calling because they needed something from me, and I wasn't about to let them use me again. The next morning, I woke up feeling more determined than ever. It was time to focus on me, on building my life, my career, and my future. I couldn't keep looking back. Couldn't keep wondering if things could have been different. They weren't. And that was just the reality of it. From that day forward, I made a promise to myself. I wasn't going to let my family drag me down anymore. I'd been through enough, and I was finally in a place where I was starting to build something good for myself. I wasn't about to let them ruin that. Sure, part of me still felt guilty for cutting them off, for not helping when they were clearly in a tough spot. But then I reminded myself, where were they when I was struggling? Where were they when I needed help? Yeah, I didn't owe them anything. So I kept going. I worked hard, saved my money, and kept my focus on the future. And every time I started to feel that old guilt creeping in, I reminded myself of that phone call. They made their bed, and now they had to lie in it. I wasn't going to be their safety net anymore. And honestly, it felt good to finally be free. I finally saved up enough to buy a really nice apartment, and it's honestly the best thing that's happened to me. I was in the middle of a project, knee-deep in designs and completely focused, when the doorbell rang. At first, I thought it might be a package or something. I'd been ordering a bunch of stuff for work, so I didn't think twice about it. But when I checked the security camera, I froze. There, standing on my porch, were my parents. And Tom. My stomach did this weird flip, and I felt like someone had punched me. They hadn't reached out since that call from Tom weeks ago. I thought we were done. So why the hell were they here? I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself down before opening the door. My mind was racing with all the possible reasons they could be standing there. Maybe they were here to apologize, or maybe they just needed something else. Honestly, I didn't know which would be worse. When I opened the door, my mom, Susan, didn't even wait for me to say anything. She pushed past me like she owned the place, her eyes scanning my living room like she was appraising it. "Wow, Robin, you've really done well for yourself," she said, this weird smile on her face, the kind that wasn't really a smile at all. I just stood there, stunned. Tom followed her in, looking uncomfortable, while my dad, Mark, shuffled in last, his hands stuffed in his pockets like he had no idea what to do with himself. "What are you guys doing here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My heart was pounding and I could feel this tension building up inside me. I knew this wasn't going to be a good conversation, but I was hoping, maybe, just maybe, I was wrong. Mom turned around, that fake smile still plastered on her face. "We're here to talk about living arrangements." I blinked, confused. "What?" Dad cleared his throat, and for the first time since they'd arrived, he spoke. "We think it's time for the family to be back together." I almost laughed. It was so absurd, so ridiculous that for a second I thought they were joking. "You're joking, right?" I asked, my voice dripping with disbelief. Mom's smile faded, and she crossed her arms, looking at me like I was the one being unreasonable. "No, Robin, we've talked it over, and we think it's time we all live together again, as a family." I stared at her, speechless. This had to be some kind of prank. "After everything that's happened? After you kicked me out on my birthday and now you want to move in with me?" Tom, who had been silent until now, chimed in with his usual smug tone. "Come on, Robin, don't be so dramatic. That's all in the past." I felt my blood boil. "All in the past? You guys threw me out on my birthday? You left me with nowhere to go, no support, nothing? And now you want to just waltz back into my life like nothing happened?" Mom's expression hardened. "We gave you the push you needed," she said, her voice cold. "And look how well you've done because of it. You should be thanking us." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were trying to take credit for my success? For everything I'd worked my ass off for? So what? You think you can just show up, claim credit for my hard work, and what? Move in here? This is my home, not yours. Dad, trying to play the peacemaker, stepped forward. Robin, be reasonable. We're struggling right now. You have all this space, and we thought it'd be nice to be together again. I shook my head, my frustration building with every word they said. You're only here because you need something. You didn't care about me when I was struggling, and now you expect me to help you? That's not how this works. Mom's face twisted with anger. We're your family, Robin. We sacrificed for you. Everything you have is because of us. I couldn't hold back anymore. Sacrificed? What exactly did you sacrifice, Mom? You kicked me out. You didn't help me when I needed it most. You threw me away like I was nothing. And now you think you're entitled to my success? To my home? She opened her mouth to argue, but I wasn't done. I've worked hard for this. I've built this life for myself with no help from you. You don't get to walk in here and claim anything. Tom rolled his eyes. God, Robin, stop being so selfish. We're just asking for a little help. That word, selfish, set me off. Selfish? I snapped. You want to talk about selfish? How about you all throwing me out of the house, leaving me with nothing? How about showing up here now, demanding that I give you a place to stay because you've screwed up your own lives? That's selfish, Tom, not me. Dad stepped forward again, his voice softer, almost pleading. Robin, please. We're just asking for a chance. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm raging inside me. No, you don't get to do this. You don't get to use me anymore. Mom's eyes narrowed. Fine. If you want to be difficult, we'll take legal action. We have rights, you know. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Legal action? On what grounds? We'll find something, she said, her voice dripping with venom. Don't push me, Robin. I let out a bitter laugh. Go ahead, try. But let me tell you something. This is my house, and you have no right to it. You're not moving in. Not now, not ever. They didn't say anything for a moment. I could see the anger and frustration building in their faces, but I didn't care. I wasn't backing down. Finally, I walked over to the front door and opened it wide. Get out, I said, my voice steady. Now. They hesitated for a moment, but I stood firm, waiting for them to leave. Mom huffed, shooting me a look full of hatred before marching out. Dad followed her, looking like he wanted to say something, but he didn't. And then Tom, who just shook his head in disbelief, walked out without another word. As soon as they were gone, I closed the door and leaned against it, taking a deep breath. My heart was still racing, and my hands were shaking, but I felt this weird sense of relief, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I wasn't going to let them take advantage of me anymore. Not now. Not ever. After I kicked my family out of my house, things got quiet again. I'm not going to lie, it was a relief. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over my own life, like I wasn't constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the end of it. My mom had thrown out that threat about legal action, and even though I didn't think she had anything to stand on, I couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't done trying to weasel their way back into my life. A few days later, I got a call from Mike. He's one of my closest friends, and lucky for me, he's also a lawyer. I had mentioned the whole situation to him in passing, but I hadn't gone into all the details. Now that my family had crossed the line, I figured it was time to get some real advice. Hey, Robin, Mike said when I answered. You free to talk? I've been thinking about your situation. Yeah, sure, I replied, suddenly feeling a bit anxious. What's up? I've been looking into your parents' situation a bit more, he said, his tone getting more serious. I know you mentioned that they've been struggling financially and you're worried they might try something shady. Well, I did some digging and it turns out they're in deeper trouble than you thought. My heart sank. I didn't want to hear this, but I knew I needed to. What do you mean? I asked. There's a history of financial issues, Robin. Tax problems, debt. It's not just that your dad lost his job and your mom's been overspending. They've been digging themselves into a hole for years. And now that you've made it clear they can't rely on you, they're getting desperate. I sat there, processing what Mike was saying. My mind flashed back to my mom's smug threats, her talking about legal action, her entitlement to what I'd worked for. It made sense now. This wasn't just about needing help. They were trying to find a way out of their own mess, and they saw me as their way out. So, what do? I asked, feeling the familiar weight of stress settling on my shoulders. Mike was quiet for a second before answering. Well, first off, you need to protect yourself. They might not have much of a case to try and take anything from you. But people do stupid things when they're desperate. We should file for a restraining order to make sure they can't harass you anymore. You've got enough evidence of their behavior, those threats, them showing up at your house. It's time to take some legal steps. A restraining order. That sounded extreme, but at the same time, I knew it was the right move. My family had already shown they didn't respect my boundaries, and if they were desperate enough to keep pushing, I needed to protect myself. I'll do it, I said, feeling a sense of resolve. Let's file the restraining order. Mike talked me through the process, and within a few days, we had everything in motion. It wasn't just about stopping them from coming to my house. It was about finally drawing the line. I wasn't going to let them drag me into their mess. I had worked too hard to get to where I was, and I wasn't about to let their issues derail my progress. As all of this was happening, I noticed something strange. I started getting weird messages from mutual acquaintances, people who knew my family but hadn't been in touch for a while. They were vague at first, but then it became clear. My parents were spreading lies about me. Apparently, I had abandoned them when they needed me most. I was selfish and ungrateful for not helping out after everything they'd done for me. It was laughable, really. The same people who kicked me out on my birthday were now trying to play the victim card. I couldn't believe it. But at the same time, it pissed me off. I had worked so hard to rebuild my life, and now they were trying to tear it down by turning people against me. I called Mike again, letting him know about the rumors. What should I do? I asked, frustration clear in my voice. Honestly, don't engage with it, he said. These people don't know the full story, and your parents are banking on the fact that you'll get defensive and try to explain yourself. Don't give them that satisfaction. We'll handle this in court if it gets that far, and trust me, you've got nothing to worry about. It wasn't easy taking Mike's advice. My first instinct was to blast the truth to anyone who would listen, to tell them how my family had treated me and why I had every right to cut them off. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized Mike was right. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. I knew the truth, and that was enough. Weeks passed, and the legal proceedings moved forward. Mike was a beast in the courtroom, and when the restraining order was finalized, I felt this huge weight lift off my shoulders. My family couldn't come near me, and if they tried to pull any more stunts, they'd be in serious legal trouble. But that wasn't the end of their problems. Remember those financial issues Mike had mentioned? Well, it turns out they were worse than we thought. After some more digging, Mike found out that my parents had been dodging taxes for years. They'd been hiding money, falsifying documents, and now the IRS was on their tail. It was almost poetic, watching the mess they had made for themselves unravel right in front of them. As much as I wanted to feel bad for them, I couldn't. They had brought this on themselves. They had made their choices, and now they had to deal with the consequences. I wasn't going to be their savior anymore. One day after everything had settled down, I sat in my living room, staring out the window and thinking about everything that had happened. It was strange feeling this sense of closure. I had spent so long feeling trapped by my family's expectations, by their manipulation and guilt trips, and now, for the first time, I felt free. Mike called later that night to check in. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "I'm good," I said, and for the first time I actually meant it. "It's been a crazy ride, but I'm good." "You did the right thing, Robin," Mike said. "They made their choices, and you made yours. Don't let them make you feel guilty for protecting yourself." I smiled to myself. He was right. I had stood up for myself, and I wasn't going to feel guilty for it. For too long, I had let my family control how I felt, how I acted, and now I was finally in control of my own life, and that felt damn good.